Serious former teens who went to wilderness camps, therapeutic boarding schools and other troubled teen programs. What were your experiences? My father lost custody of me for domestic violence and I got scooped up by CPS and put into the group home system. He got custody back a couple of months later and I ended up running away. They sent me to a place called Vision Quest, which was a place with troublemakers, but not that bad. The thing that was bad was that there wasn't any food. I was eating little single-serving cups of cream cheese. Ended up running from there with another dude, and when we got picked up I ended up in a residential treatment facility, mostly because they didn't know what to do with me since I didn't earn any jail time along the way. That place was full of mostly Native American kids. Some of them were from rival gangs. The violence was pretty bad. Midnight beatdowns, gang fights, racial violence, sexual abuse etc. The people running it really seemed to mean well and were actually pretty fair about seeing what really happened versus everyone gets punished, no matter what. Despite what the other kids were like, it was the first time anyone really told me that it was my family that was wrong and to just focus on the program and work towards an independent living program, which I did. I was definitely a troubled teen. A lot of running away, drugs, alcohol etc. My parents sent me to Elan School, in Maine. When I arrived I was strip-searched and showered by a girl, not staff. It was pretty hellish, abuse was the norm. It was a couple hundred kids and a very small handful of staff. Essentially if you won privileges you got to run things. Until you messed up and had to begin the status climb all over again. We weren't allowed to make friends, that was called a contract and other kids would report you. Our days were spent watching each other, waiting for a chance to tell on someone because that helped elevate your status. If you mess it up enough you'd get shot down. Sometimes that meant a costume meant to provoke ridicule, sometimes being put in the corner. Literally. Unable to speak, not allowed to move around. Guarded for however long by another kid. If the corner person wasn't cooperative then both got in trouble. There was also the boxing ring. One house or multi-house general meetings where you'd stand while everyone rushed you, screaming as loud as they could about what a terrible person you are. I can't type anymore tonight because I'll have bad dreams. Almost 40 years later I still see certain faces. If anyone is actually interested I can add more tomorrow, without touchpad typos lol. I went to a wilderness program then a residential treatment center. In the end, it was good for what was going on in my life, but it was a roller coaster. Raging out at being sent away one moment to being awed by nature in the next in the wilderness program, playing silly games with similar-aged teens to feeling trapped behind tall metal gates, surrounded by large staff at the residential treatment center. I learned a lot, I healed, I had some wild moments, and wished I had kept in touch with other people who were in my group. I wonder what they are doing now. Did they make it? There were pictures on the wall of the art room of people who had graduated and a therapist was having a heart-to-heart with us, told the group to look up. Then told us a good percentage of those people were dead. They relapsed, they got back with abusers, they killed themselves. It hit me in the gut. Life's hard after treatment. You've been taught a lot then you are thrown back into your old life and you have to use the skills for real. It's never as simple as the books explain it. I did Outward Bound when I was 18. The group consisted of about 14 of us, all between the ages of 16 and 20. One girl was sent by her parents, I assumed to straighten her up. On the first night we camped, she fled. She took a map, a compass, and I think some matches and was gone when we woke up. We were told later she had made it to a road and hitchhiked to somewhere. I think she eventually made it home. If there are camps specifically for kids in trouble, her parents should have sent her to one of those. Added after reading the other stories, I think I see why her parents didn't send her to a place for trouble kids. JFC. I was in juvenile detention for a few weeks when I was 14, I had a third-degree misdemeanor. It was basically just jail but for teenagers. The only major difference I can think of is that we mostly had our own cells. I came out suicidal and would get panic attacks for years at the smallest things that reminded me of the place. I did the Northwest Youth Conservation Corporation. It is not exactly a troubled teens program, but I was put in an interesting situation. I joined because it seemed like a fun way to spend a summer outdoors, doing some hard but worthwhile work in the wilderness, and make some money to buy a home-built PC gaming rig. I knew another person joining for the 6 weeks and it just seemed like a normal teenager summer thing. For the most part it was. See, Usually the crews are 5 guys, and 5 girls. They did not have enough girls. So I got put on the all-guys crew. The all-guys crew had what seemed like mostly troubled kids and a few outright dangerous kids. We also got all the hardest projects and worked our asses off. Still loved every minute of it and reflect upon it fondly. If you are ever walking the trail along the coast to Cannon Beach in Oregon, I helped build some of it. Got the shit repeatedly beat out of me at a Mormon boarding school in Provo, Utah. Almost everyone there was kept on incredibly high doses of antipsychotics to keep us in line, and so we couldn't fight back. When we did, there was getting beat, strapped to a table, injected with drugs like Haldol, and the tossed naked into a concrete cell. School was a joke there and didn't actually bother to teach anyone anything. And the therapists, well, what they and the other employees deserve probably isn't allowed to be said on here. Those that have been know what I'm talking about. Basically, the whole experience was rather quite unpleasant. I went to a therapeutic away program for a month and I witnessed a lot of fucked up things. They gave me some unneeded medication, and I witnessed a girl beat another girl up on the ground and get her hair pulled out of her scalp. The same girl also poured chocolate milk on another girl's head. We also weren't allowed to speak to the boys because apparently a girl and a boy had sex in the guys' dorm thing. Also, a girl was accused of sexually harassing another girl and had to sleep outside. Shit's whack. In '08, after repeat trips to various mental hospitals in the Northeast after a severe depressive episode, I was woken up in the middle of the night by 2 guys who told me I was going on a trip. I should add that at this point in my life I had been arrested repeatedly for things like assault, vandalism, disorderly conduct, affray, truancy, and other troubled kid behavior. Well, I put up a fight and was promptly put in cuffs and walked out of my house by these 2 guys and my father. An hour later I was on an airplane to Salt Lake City to a residential treatment center/evaluation facility run by Mormons. Intake felt like jail. I was asked to strip naked in a cold shower room. It's February and told to cover myself in lice shampoo and squat and cough. I had to sit there for 10 minutes for the shampoo to do its thing while these 2 guys eyed me up and down. I was allowed a quick 5-minute cold shower before I was escorted to an exam room. A nurse asked questions and made notations about all my tattoos and scars. She didn't believe half of what I told her and obviously wrote that in her notes. Heading onto the unit was interesting. I wasn't allowed out of my room for 2 days before until I was done with the intake process. Still, other kids there found ways to communicate with me despite a staff member sticking their head in our rooms every 5-10 minutes. Once I was out onto the unit, I met kids from all over the U.S. that came from many different traumatic backgrounds and fucked up experiences from other facilities. I heard about the wilderness programs in the South quite a bit. Most of the kids were like me, depressed drug users that went through some things in life and didn't handle it well. Some were victims of sexual abuse, etc. On to the horror stories. A 12-year-old patient was brought in and shared a room with a 18-year-old guy who was truly weird. He was in there for trying to kill his father with a hammer, and he had an obsession with black metal and drawing musicians in paint, battle armor, etc. I woke up to screaming one night and heard the staff members struggling with someone. Both those patients were gone the next day. Turned out the black metal guy beat the younger kid and was raping him. Next one, meds were big in this place, especially antipsychotics. We didn't have a choice in what we took and were forced to get our meds from a nurse ratchet type at 7:30 a.m. then sit in the day room after until breakfast. A good chunk of us were on Seroquel due to having a history of aggressive behavior. A picture I still have clear in my head is that group of kids, including myself, sitting in the day room drooling on ourselves and being screamed at by staff for dozing off while waiting. After a tough couple of days, when I found out I was going to be stuck there for a year and possibly move across the street to another Mormon facility, I woke up in a foul mood and reacted to a staff member telling me to wake up. I sucker punched him and was promptly restrained and dragged to an isolation room. This isolation room was completely tiled and big enough for them to drag my mattress in. There were paper signs on the wall with Mormon inspirational texts and only one fluorescent light. I was upped on my meds to be heavily sedated and left in this room for 3 days with a staff member sitting in a chair watching me 24/7. I got out to smiles from the other patients who had been in the same place in the past. Final story: a girl was admitted who was from an area close to where I lived. Some group therapy sessions included both male and females, and sometimes they mixed us in one of the day rooms just to remind us the other sex existed. We got to talking and started bonding as friends. Every time we were mixed together we chatted about food back home, the accents, the beaches, Boston etc. One day we were chatting and she was pulled out of the day room by her doctor for a phone call with the family. I didn't see her again after because it wasn't good. That night she stuffed her bed with things to make it seem like she was sleeping. She wedged a chair somehow in her room so it wouldn't flip, sat down on the ground and put a sheet around the top and around her neck and hoisted herself up to cut off airflow to her head. She managed to cut her wrists too and that was it. We never heard any yelling like some of the other incidents or any word. She just wasn't in the facility anymore. I was told by my doctor who knew I was friends with her that she had killed herself. A girl who was friends with her on the unit explained to me how, though I'd how much I be.